I'm so glad to finally meet you, Matt. I'm so glad you're on the Everything Saxophone podcast. I think this is going to be such a super valuable episode for people, especially when it comes to, saxophone repairs and how do you know when you go to one and, what do we need to know, as players, what do we need to know? So welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm excited to talk saxophone. If I have a reputation at all, it's probably that I talk a lot about saxophones.
Well, it's an awesome reputation. That's why I reached out to you. But yeah, before we get to repairs, give us a little bit about your background. How did you get involved with saxophone repairs, and when did you start playing saxophones, all that kind of thing.
Got it. So I started playing sax in, fifth grade or whatever it was that was standard, like where I grew up. I don't remember the story, but I know my parents would tell me, like, as I was progressing through high school and stuff, that they said, well, why the saxophone? It's like the most expensive one to rent. And I said, I just love the sound. And I think honestly it was like, my dad's record collection. When they weren't around, I would scratch his records up trying to put them on. And he had some old jazz records, and that, like, hearing Paul Desmond for the first time, like, that was sort of my, oh, like that's an alto saxophone. And then kind of got deeper into other stuff as time went on. But in fifth grade, I think Take Five was like the coolest thing I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
So I played growing up. I started to harbor ambitions of like being like making it a living. And then I was in all-state band in high school in Maryland, and I was a senior in my second year there playing the baritone chair. And I was sitting next to this tenor player named Doug O'Connor, who was a freshman at the time. And he was so good, so head and shoulders above everybody else there. And he's a freshman. And, I was like, how long you been playing? He's like, oh, I started in seventh grade, and he was just a monster. And he's actually like a fairly well-known classical player now. For a really amazing recording, look up the what is it? The Bach. It'll come to me. It's like a super famous piece. It'll come to me later on. But he's now like a really good professional player. And like that was the first time where I was like, oh, maybe like I can't make a living playing sax. So I went to college. The guidance that I had was go to college, go to college, go to college. I got there and I was like, okay, now what? I started doing music ed, and the director of the bands on the first day looked at the sax section and he said, if it was up to me, there wouldn't be saxophones in the band. And I
Oh,
was like, well, shit.
what?
So didn't have a great time there. I tried a lot of different majors. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I dropped out, and I figured, I'll just get jobs and like quit when they suck. So I quit a lot of jobs, like 30 jobs in.
Oh
I'm
my
working for
God.
a nonprofit, and I'm like early for a meeting someday, and there's nothing nearby except for a pawn shop. And I go in to kill some time, and there's a sax on the wall, and I just so happened to know it was worth money because it was the professional version of the horn I grew up on. I had a Bisher Aristocrat, which was like the Bundy one before they renamed it. But like in the 30s, that was a pro horn. And like the one thing I knew about vintage saxophones was like my horn used to be professional and now it wasn't. And they had the professional version on the wall for $80. And that being a lot of money to me at the time, I made the bet. I bought it, put it in the back of the car with no case. There's no internet, no smartphones yet. So I'm driving around. I finally get home. I dial up. I get on eBay. They're selling for like $1,500. And I
Oh,
was like, if I could learn how to fix these things, like maybe I could make a living. So I quit that job, and I was living in Florida at the time in Orlando. And there was a local music store there called Sam Ash that's like kind of nationwide. And my first day on the job, as soon as my trainer went away, I called up the corporate office and I was like, do you guys have apprenticeship programs for woodwind repair? And the lady's like, hold please. A minute later, this old guy picks up, hello. I'm like, who am I talking to? This is Paul Ash. It's like the president of the company.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
shit. I stammer through, what I want. And he says, move to New York and call me back. Hung up. So I waited about a month or two. And then I told my manager, I was like, oh yeah, Paul Ash approved my transfer to New York City. And they said, okay. And, they put it all through. I sold everything I owned. I moved to New York City. I showed up on day one. They sent me into the flagship store in Times Square. And, in the interim time, since I bought that horn in the pawn shop and this period, it was like a year. And I would spend all my off time, I printed out a list of like saxophones and serial numbers. There's a few websites back then, like Steve Goodson, Worldwide Sax, Sax Picks was like new and up and coming. And between those resources, I started to learn about vintage horns and what was worth what. And I would look at eBay, and so I would buy a horn, like maybe it needed a neck cork. And I would buy the tools to do a neck cork, sell that, reinvest, and buy like one more tool. I cycled through that, and I try not to mess things up. But like one time I bought like a piccolo trumpet for $50 because I thought it was a toy and it didn't play. It turned one of the valves around and it played. It was a Yamaha
Oh,
piccolo trumpet.
oh
So
man.
I took that money, reinvested it, and so I'm starting to get some tools. So I show up, and I know a tiny bit, not much. There was really not too many resources back then. There was like a repair manual from the like 30s that you could buy, but that was pretty much it. And there's 3 websites, and I'd call
Wow.
them up and try and talk to guys who are really busy and ask them questions about sax repair. But I showed up, and I'm like, hey, I'm your new apprentice, and the guy working there is like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, shit.
Like, I don't have room for anybody.
Oh no.
I'm like, oh my God. Like, I literally don't have a car anymore. And I have like $500 left to my name. Um, so, the manager comes back. He's like, oh yeah, this guy got transferred. Like, he works here now, but the guy who was supposed to train me was not happy about it. So he's like, I got a job for you. And he hands me a Mark VI, which is the first one I'd ever seen. And he's like, yeah, overhaul this, but you can't do it in here. You got to do it in this other room. And so I was so naive. I was just like, okay. And like, it's like,
Oh.
what do I do first? He's like, disassemble it. Go disassemble it. Come back. Now what? Now wash it. Just go stepwise through this over like a week and a half, and I finish it. It was including like a mechanical rebuild. He's like, yeah, now you swedge it. You squeeze it this way. All right, get out of here. And at the end of the week, he's like, kind of got a grin on his face, and he's like, all right, yeah, let's see how you did. And he plays it, and he's like, it actually plays. And then the manager comes back, and he's like, so how's my horn overhaul coming along?
Wow.
Because the manager's Mark VI.
Oh.
Um,
Oh
and he
my
picks it up and plays it. And, at this point, I'm starting to realize, like, oh, I think he was trying to get me fired.
yeah.
But the guy plays it. He's happy with it. And he's like, oh, great. Yeah, right. You got a seat here. And the guy who, was then forced to train me was like, damn it. But so that was how I started. And I sort of, I was the lowest man on the totem pole at Sam Ash in New York City, and I had to go to the Brooklyn store. I had to go to Long Island to set up their John Baptiste horns, and I was just kind of all over the place, working really, really hard. And 8 months after I started, the head woodwind guy got fired, and then the next month, the next woodwind guy fell down the stairs because we were working in like this old brownstone in Times Square. They're torn down now, but you remember Music Row,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and that little brownstone there in the middle of nowhere, the building's like 130 years old. The steps going downstairs had like that curve in the middle, from being stepped on so much, and it was tiny. And this guy slipped, shattered his leg, and there was no accessibility, so he couldn't get back there to work. So it was just me. And the manager, because I overhauled his horn, was under the impression I knew what I was doing. So he's like, well, we'll hire somebody if we need to. And so people would come in, they'd say, can you fix this? I'd say, I think so. And I'd go home, I'd break my horn that way. I had this little studio apartment and a little tiny bench in the back. I'd break my horn and, fix it, go to sleep, get a couple hours of sleep, go back into work on their horn. And, never messed anybody's horn up that I know of. And just did that for years, and eventually like got kind of okay at it. And once people started, coming in and asking for me by name after a couple years of that, that was actually right after the financial crisis, and like my partner at the time got laid off. And so, we're living in New York City on a saxophone repairman salary. And, people were asking for me by name. I was like, maybe I could move somewhere cheaper and like still do this. So I moved to the woods of North Carolina, and, never had I've literally since the first day I've worked, because people say like, how do you do this? Well, get lucky 1,000 times in a row. Like I've never not been busy. Like I have never had ever since day one an empty bench. And I'm just so unbelievably lucky that I can live way out here in the middle of nowhere. I've got like a 2-year wait list and I only work on vintage horns, which is my dream. That's what I wanted to do in the beginning. And I was like, I
Wow.
want to work on vintage horns. Like I'm just attracted to them. I like them. I love them. Like I want to spend a lot of time. I want to do it my way. I want to work on vintage horns. And that's what I ended up doing. And along the way, I realized that there weren't a lot of resources for people. Vintage horns, a lot of them had bad reputations because, on these old horns, unless the overhaul is really good and it gets out of the way, you're playing the overhaul, not the horn, right? So people are like, oh, content M's are squishy, but they're not. They're really not. Or the Martin was real stuffy. Like it's not. That's the overhaul. Once they're repaired well though, and the overhaul gets out of the way, and the repair is invisible, then you get to play the horn. And all these horns, they're so beautiful in different ways, and the craftsmanship of these old horns is just so amazing. And there's so many things to pick from. I like to imagine, like, if you walked into a music store in like 1938, you'd see a Selmer balanced action, you'd see like a King Zephyr special, you'd see a Con 10M, like all these horns that are so different from one another. They've all got these different concepts of what a saxophone can be. And you get to pick from widely varying things, where today they're all the Selmer design. They're all within a very narrow range of like tonal characteristics. There's more brands to choose from now, but most of them are actually just rebranded from the same like 6 or 7 factories in East Asia, in addition to Yamaha, Yanagasawa, Selmer, and I guess Calworth and the small Italian makers too, that still actually make like professional saxophones. But these horns are all just so worthwhile and they're so great. It's just that people didn't know. So I started making YouTube videos on like what's special about them, like what to expect if you repair them, like what to look out for, like what's good, what's bad, like what you can live with and what you can't. And I figured eventually someone would start making like professional quality videos that were a lot better than mine, and I could stop, but it hasn't happened yet. So actually, after this, I'm going to be making a video on a Kano sax, which will be kind of fun because I overhauled my first one like last year, and I borrowed it back from the guy so I can take a video of it. Now, it's not a horn most people will buy, but it's kind of cool to see.
I never heard of that
So,
horn.
um, it's in the house right now, but that's the one that's a straight saxophone in the key of F,
Wow.
made by Kahn. It's got the bell, like the ball on the end of the bell,
Oh, okay, yeah.
and it's keyed from low A to high G, and it has a different tonality than like any other sax. And there's only like, I don't know, 35 of them left or something like that. So they're really, really cool. And it's kind of like if you read Saxophone Journal back in the day. Remember like Paul Cohen's like saxophone gear article?
Yeah.
His the one that I remember was on the Kano sax, and it's just like it was so weird. I'd never heard of it, never seen anything like that. The fact that there used to be way different saxophones, I think that was honestly like the thing that really turned me onto it in the first place. That, and the first time I went to a repairman, it was down in the basement somewhere in Maryland. This guy had shag carpet, and he just like performed some magic. He's got like all these records on the wall and like signed posters and stuff, and he just did some magic on my horn, and suddenly I could play better. I was enjoying the horn more, and the idea that that was a job, that was a service someone could provide. Even then, I was like, whoa, like this is really cool. It didn't occur to me that I could do it, but I do remember that first repairman that I visited and how cool that was. And yeah, and that, so now I'm going to make a video on the Kano sax, which is like kind of one of the first horns I ever really noticed as like a weird type of sax. So,
Wow, that's awesome. And you know what? After, when this airs, maybe you'll have that video by that point. We'll put that link definitely in the show notes for sure.
okay, cool.
Yeah, I have to backtrack for a second. So, oh yeah, I know Sam Ash very well. When I was teaching in public schools in New York, I taught one of the Ash sons. I taught Max, and
Oh,
it's so ironic too. And we were talking before we started taping how I'm from Long Island, and so my main repair person was in Sam Ash and Carl Place.
Oh yeah,
Kirk, excuse me, Kirk. He's great.
yeah. Yeah, actually, I talked to him a few times when I was like brand new. So I was in New York in like the 2000s, and I think he was still there at that point. And like, it was brand new, so it's like, if I called like a repair shop out of Sam Ash, like they could hang up on me. But if it was within the Sam Ash chain, like they had to help me. So Kirk was one of the people I would call.
Yeah, he was really good, and really nice guy, always made the time for me. But that's so funny with that shared relationship there with the Sam Ashes and stuff. And I remember also, going to Music Row, which is no longer in existence. It's just so sad to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. It was really weird. I went to New York for the first time in a while, like I guess like shortly before the pandemic started, and went through that street, and
Yeah.
I was there when like Sam Ash like closed that store I was in. Actually, the reason that that store, the original woodwind and brass one, originally closed was um, the back wall of that building had an 18-inch buckle,
Oh
and
my
that was
gosh.
the wall my bench was bolted to.
Oh.
So we showed up for work one day, and the building is locked, like with like a note on it that it's no longer fit for habitation or business.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and we had to move the entire store across the street on St. Patrick's Day. So we're carrying like all this heavy equipment across the street, and there's like all these people from Long Island, like looks heavy, like pushing down on stuff. So
Jesus Christ. Typical New
that
York.
was, yes. I mean, the whole store, everything by hand across the street, because there was, like there was no warning. But we were like back up and doing business again like a week later in the new location across the street. But yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the end. There was when that Sam Ash, because I think Rockefeller owned all those properties, and so when finally they had a reason to break that lease, they were like, yes. And, they knocked all those buildings down, and, now it's high rises. But I remember going into Manny's, and you remember all those pictures on the wall?
Yes.
As they're packing everything up in Manny's, I walk in, and it's closed to the public at this time. But like at the very end there, the manager of Manny's was like the super manager of all the Sam Ashes and Manny's on the street. So every once in a while, you'd have to walk in there and talk to him. And there was all those signed pictures were in a like cube, like stacked on the floor. It was like 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet, just this huge pile of priceless musical artifacts, and I'd always seen them on the wall, and it's like the Who or something like that. And I walked over and looked down, and there's like, one from like Eric Clapton just sitting on the top. And I'm like, where are these going to go? And they're like, oh,
Oh.
yeah, we don't know yet. So I'm not sure if that was true, if they just want to tell me. But like, that was the last time I saw that huge collection of photos from Manny's just in a huge square on the ground. And it was just surreal. And it was
Oh my
shortly
God.
after that I moved. They moved the store to like 34th Street, and I moved down here to North Carolina.
Oh my gosh. I'm now that you said that, I'm wondering, yes, where did they put those pictures? I'm going to be curious. Anybody that's listening to this podcast, if you know, let us know in the comments section on the blog post on saxophonepodcast.com, because we're both going to be very curious about that.
Yeah, I've always
Oh,
wondered. I mean, I imagine they might have stayed with the family that originally owned Manny's, because the manager that worked there, although Sam Ash bought Manny's, the manager that worked there was still like I think he was like Manny's son, um, Ian Goldrich, and so I wondered if maybe they've got him squirreled away somewhere. But yeah, that was super weird. And now going back there now, and it's all just gone. There's still a couple stores on 46th, but nothing else as far as I can tell.
yeah, it's so sad. And I remember speaking to, I think it's Roberto Romeo, and we were talking about the same thing, not as in depth, but the same thing. How, I mean, that was the place to go to. I remember
Yeah,
I brought my sea trumpet from Manny's. That was a long time ago, in the '90s actually. But those were the places to go.
yeah,
That's such history, and people don't. If you're not aware of that, you just don't realize the impact of that closing down.
yeah. And uh, my story as far as like being like somewhat self-taught while working in a store. self-taught is, I really use it loosely because I could, and I did, walk down the street to Roberto's and talk to the repair people there, and they were helpful. And I could go across the street to either of the Baltimores and talk to them. And there was like another guy over by Columbus Circle. I forget his name. The guy with the rockets on the ceiling. I don't know if you ever went to that store. He was like really
No.
big into like advanced amateur rocketry, and these like huge, like 6 foot long rockets hanging from the ceiling. Perry Ritter. And yeah, you could just, and sometimes they'd come over and be like, hey, like, do you have this tool? Like, I haven't bought it yet. You'd lend them a tool. It was a pretty congenial atmosphere between, everyone was competing, and there's one guy in particular, I won't name him, but if he came into the shop, you had to like keep a real eye on him because like one of your tools might leave
Oh my gosh.
permanently. But it was pretty congenial, and I don't think I could have learned the way I did if I didn't have this huge amount of resources available to me, literally within walking distance, and also calling. And people today, just, I don't think there's anywhere that you could learn this job that has that. And that's one of the reasons that, like, one of the many reasons I make the videos and stuff I do, which, in addition to, there's a lot more resources available now. There's a really great repair manual called the Woodwind Repair Manual by Reg Thorpe. Like, you can kind of learn it, but it was always passed down, and that was like the last place that actually was still happening. And now it's all gone. It's weird.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too, from what I remember, because this can actually lead to a question I wasn't planning on asking, but people may be curious about becoming repairmen, repair people for instruments and stuff like that. And I know there was a time Five Towns College on Long Island in Dix Hills used to have a program for repairing instruments. They stopped that. In my mind, that's really foolish because there's barely anywhere to go, for if you want to get a college education in this. But your experience was totally different. I mean, you just jumped right in, and you actually jumped right in probably the best place, the most stressful place, New York.
Yeah, I used to have hair. That started going away real quick when I was learning repair on the job in New York City.
Yeah, where everything's got to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend. I actually just moved to Vermont from New York, and yeah, my first thought was like, it's definitely a different atmosphere when you're going from New York to anywhere else. Everywhere else, it seems like it's so much slower. Life is so much slower than New York, where it's just crazy. But you did it yourself. And you were resourceful and everything like that. But people coming up today, yes, now they could watch your videos. They could probably, they're not going to get the same exact wealth of information that you had in the sense that you were around people, but people will have the videos to watch that will certainly help them. But if someone was to come up now and they wanted to become a repair person, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that they go to a college, take a college course and stuff like that, get a degree, or should they just jump in like you did?
I think it probably depends on their personality. There are still a few places that have like a formal training program. There's like, they're mostly in the Northwest, I think.
Yeah.
I forget their names. But if you look up, instrument repair school, like there's 3 or 4 options these days. It's, structured. It's kind of, provided for you. And at the end, the idea isn't that you're going to go out and be a repairer. The idea is that now you are qualified to be an apprentice. And, for people who like that kind of structure, if, being around other people learning the same thing appeals to you, and you've got the means to go do that, I think that's a really good option. There's also, if you happen to live close to someone who does repair, there's the age-old, hey, let me sweep your floors,
Yeah.
and like see if we can move on from there. What I don't think there's much of is, I want to be an apprentice, pay me a living wage while you teach me. From the perspective of a repairer, that decreases my productivity by a lot for a while, right? It's a long, long time before someone that I'm teaching can actually do enough that it makes up for the time I've spent teaching, right?
Yeah.
And usually by that time, they're probably like raring to go out on their own. So it's mostly, depending on the structure of your shop, if you're a one-man shop like me, that's a really hard thing to do. And people ask me if I'm going to take on an apprentice, and I'm just like, I can't, but what I can do is write articles and make videos, and hopefully that's my contribution. But larger stores in particular often have, especially like, what I do is like saxophone overhauls, mostly like vintage saxophone overhauls. I take a week a piece. There's a lot of places, and you'll typically make more money if you do school band instrument repair. There's a lot more throughput, and you get usually paid a flat rate per piece. And a clean and flush on a trumpet, if you're doing 50 of those a day, and you've got an ultrasonic cleaner, and you're just cranking through them, like, you're actually making a pretty good living. It's just a very different type of work than what I do, and I'm not good at that. But that's where the majority of the money in this business is spent. And there's, then there's trying to do it yourself if you've got a technical aptitude and certain type of personality. If you get wrapped up in mechanical things, then I think it is possible to be self-taught in the same way I was, where, you might be leading your own education, but you're utilizing every resource you can possibly find, calling people, reading stuff, trying things on your own, visiting shops, and just because you can't walk across the street like I used to, like, I still actually will fly to go see colleagues and like chat, and get like that really gets like the juices flowing and gives you new ideas. And really, I think with the craft, like saxophone playing too, right? Like if you're not constantly being like invigorated by other people's perspectives, like you can stagnate. And I think that, I don't ever want to be like that. I don't want to be lazy. I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to think I'm actually really good at this, because then I'll stop really pressing at it. I think that pushing, regardless of where you are, is really important to actually doing a good job. Whether you're in your first year or your 20th, like you have to have that hunger, whether you're playing or fixing.
Let me expand upon that for a second. So that's a great tip that you're giving to people. And again, it could apply to players and to repair people and other fields as well. You're working on a lot of vintage horns, right? So when you're, flying to other people and talking to them, what are some things that you're learning? Like I have a couple of thoughts in my head. You're working on vintage horns. The parts are still out there, thank God, right? But in some cases,
Sometimes, yeah.
yeah, I was just about to say sometimes they're not. And then that's the first thing I'm thinking about. The second thing is that, someone may say, well, what else could he possibly, be learning by flying out to somebody? It's a vintage horn. It's not like a new horn. What else could he possibly be learning? I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. What is some of the stuff that you all talk about?
I mean, honestly, at this point, the conversation is just so nerdy. It's like, so, I mean, think about like some really complex piece that you're playing, right? That you've, or maybe a piece that you've played 100 times, and you think you know everything about it. And then you hear someone else play it, and they've got an idea that works really well, that sounds really good, and you're like, how have I played this 100 times and I was never in that place, But you hear it, and now you've got like a new seed, right, for like doing things your way, but a little different, and sort of iterating and evolving. And I think it's like that, right? I mean, it's fortunately or unfortunately, these horns, they've got 80 years of history on them, and they've all lived different lives at this point. It's not like they're all coming from the factory and I'm doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Each overhaul is different. Each overhaul, if I've got 1,000 procedures, I know I'm just like pulling a number out of the air. I use a different mix of 150 on each horn I do. Every once in a while, something really crazy comes through, and I'm using half of my knowledge like on one horn. But usually it's pieces of it, and they're applied differently, and I have to make these decisions. Where, okay, like how do I think this horn was damaged? Like how do I reverse that damage, and how's that going to affect all the stuff going on down here? How's this metal going to move? This metal looks like this. This one's been relacquered. The last time I did it, like, it was original finish. This one looks like it's pretty thin. This one looks like it was stored somewhere hot. This one looks like the dentwork's been done 5 or 6 times. Like, there's a lot of just really fine experiential knowledge that is really handy to be able to ask someone else about this, the videos I put out, the books you can buy, it's all very broad level, sort of like to draw comparisons. Like, here's how you play over changes, but it's like, well, what if your bass player is doing this? Like, what if the room sounds like this? What if like your drummer is playing it like a little faster than it's supposed to be? Like, you have to be able to use your knowledge to fit the particular situation and do a good job, so that the people listening, the people playing the horn, just think it was easy, just think it was another job. But like, there was 10 different things that you sort of tweaked to like make that a good experience. So it's if you want to pay attention to it, similar to lead to music, I think it's an infinite, ongoing, forever type of thing. It's like that old Pablo Casal's quote, right? He's like 95 and they're asking why he's still practicing. He says, well, because I think I'm making progress. So I think it's the same way with repair and with music and with any, craft that you want to get better at, honestly.
For sure. You alluded to something, and I know this is a common question that people ask all the time, especially when it comes to Mark VIs. Should I relacquer it? Will it change the sound? I got to ask it.
So the answer for that, there's actually a real answer, which is great. So people are going from, step 1 to step 10 there and saying, relacquering causes the sound to change, which can sometimes be true, but for reasons that are not typically understood. And the reason is, back in the day, 20s and 30s, when you wanted your horn overhauled, a lot of times you sent it back to the factory, and they would, overhaul it, and they would relacquer it. And they had these huge vats of like heated nitric acid that they would put the horn in, and the lacquer, which was nitrocellulose, would just come right off. And then they would quickly color buff it, which is a very, very light buffing, and overhaul the horn, and you'd have a refinished and overhauled horn. But the way that it was refinished was done in a comparatively delicate way by professionals who were doing this all the time. I mean, there's guys in the factory like buffing horns day in, day out, day in, day out, right? I mean, the horn you buy, it's been buffed, right? Like, it got buffed before they put lacquer on it. But the way buffing happens, it's a big wheel that spins at like 2,500 RPM, and there's an abrasive on it, and they literally hold the horn up against it. Now, if you take that abrasive wheel against like an area like the bell, right? It's big and flat. The force is spread out. It's also not a mechanically operative part of the horn. If you do it on the edge of a tone hole, on the end of a key, you're taking off material that's mechanically operative. You're taking the tone hole, it's not flat anymore. You're taking the key, which used to fit perfectly between the posts and had square ends, and you're rounding those off, and now it wiggles. And after the factories ceased to exist in the 50s, people still expected their horns to be relacquered with an overhaul. So all these local stores, which didn't have the resources, and buffing sucks and it's dangerous, you can lose fingers, would, the lowest men in the totem poles doing this job, and therefore they're not very well trained. They don't have the right equipment. They're buffing the lacquer off instead of dipping it in a heated bath of nitric acid, because that's hard to have in a store in like downtown, Poughkeepsie. And the end result was vastly different. And the tone holes would be unlevel. The keys would be, loose between the posts. And, after 3 or 4 of these overhauls, the metal starts to get thin as well. It dents easier. It might be thinner in other places than others. They might buff the neck tenon, and now it's not airtight. They're buffing the posts. They're taking metal away from places that you really shouldn't. Now, that is fixable, but it's also really hard to fix, and it's really rare to have it fixed all the way. So unless you're doing a whole lot of extra work to kind of like stretch things back to where they need it to be, you're ending up with a horn that is like, the key work's looser, the pads are not sealing as well because the tone holes are unlevel, and it's hard to make pads seal on unlevel tone holes. They might have like a razor sharp edge on the tone hole, and they're like cutting pads. You just get a less reliable horn back. So in aggregate, the sort of like cultural idea we have of relacquered horns is that they're less good, and we ascribe it to like the weight of the metal or like something, because all of what I just explained is a lot more boring and harder to understand than like color right? It's like people are like, silver sounds really bright and gold sounds really rich. And it's like, either we live in a world where those associations with our visual cortex are perfectly applied to sound, or we're simplifying, right? And that's what's happened with relacquering. We've simplified all these weird mechanical defects that can happen when it's done wrong, which is the way it's usually done because of how the history is that goes back to the 20s, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, don't relacquer your horn. You can do it well. It's really, really rare. And it's also a really dirty job. So I won't do it. It sucks. But it's possible to do. It's just rarely done well. So, and it's also possible to take a relacquered horn and overhaul it so that it plays like it was never relacquered. I've taken horns that are really, really beat, and so have other people. This isn't like me being magical. Like, it's possible to take horns that are really, really beat, relacquered so bad you can't see the engraving, the tone holes are all wavy, get it tight again, get everything level again. It's not the same horn it was before, but it's a great horn now. That's possible. It's just rare. Like, overhauling a relacquered horn to be as good as a horn that has never undergone that mechanical stress is probably like at least half again as much time, if not double time. And people often don't want to pay that much money and spend that much time on a relacquered horn anyways, especially since it'll play all right if you just repad it. But in general, keep your variables low with your horns. And relacquering introduces like a million variables that can be fixed, but it's hard. So yeah, don't do it. But if you got one and it plays great, that's entirely possible. It's not inherent to the relacquering process that the horn sucks. It's just that it happens a lot.
That's so interesting. I'm so glad that you gave that incredibly detailed explanation. I'm curious, are there, you mentioned how they used to do it in the factories and all that kind of stuff. Are there places, do the manufacturers, or are there places that do it that old way?
I don't think exactly the same, but I think, like the modern equivalent of that nitric acid bath would be like some sort of like chemical stripper, right? But there's also two different types of lacquer. They started being epoxy based like in the 80s, which are much harder to get off and much thicker. They used to be nitrocellulose, which is somewhat explosive in its vaporous form. So it's a little bit dangerous to like have a full like nitrocellulose lacquering setup. And there's just not an economy that really drives someone to have the proper setup to do that. Like there's a guy who does plating in Pittsburgh, and his results are really, really good, and they look a lot like the old stuff. And it's literally because the store he works at has existed for 100 years, and they have had that plating system since like the 30s.
Wow.
So there's places like that where they've got equipment that has been handed down over a long time. But I mean, even if someone was to give me all that stuff right now, like the economics of it, I need a whole room, I need all this training, like it's a dirty job. There's not many people who really want it. Like it's probably going to be pretty hard to find. But I assume if I had like infinite money and time, I could find someone who would actually do it right. I just don't know who that is.
Got it. Okay. Now let me ask this question, because we're talking about overhauls and that kind of thing. How does someone know that they need an overhaul, and how frequently how frequently should you get an overhaul? Can you talk about that?
Sure. So that's, it's, and, because I'm being asked a lot of questions in a row, typically, someone calls me and has one question. It's not so clear that all of my answers sort of follow the same formula. It's highly variable. It depends on the person.
Sure.
And there's no easy answer. Depending on how much you play and how well you take care of it, assuming the job was done well in the first place, anywhere from 7 to 20 years, I would say. Sometimes less. I mean, there's people, on the extreme end that, play 6 to 8 hours a day. And, 5 to 8 years of that much playing on the same pads would be pretty good. And of course, it also depends on how much maintenance you do in the meantime. There's something called a clean oil adjust, which is optional, expensive, but really does keep the horn playing super well for a long time. Or you disassemble it, clean it, put it back together bit by bit and change anything that needs changed as you put it back together. And it kind of like, instead of there being a slow degradation of your overhaul over time, it kind of goes boop, 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 and like eventually after like, 4 or 5 of those, it's like, okay, it's just time to like kind of renew everything. But so it really depends. As far as how that's hard too, because like, some people just replace a few pads at a time, over a very, very long time span. I would say it's probably better for the instrument to, get the whole thing apart, clean, put it back together. But take it to someone you trust and get a good opinion from like a repairer, and maybe several. And, but a lot of times you'll have a choice whether it's like, well, I could do $200 worth of work on this and get it like, up to 80% or something, or you could go crazy and do like a $1,500 overhaul and get it, back up to 100%. And of course, just like anything else, you still have the skill of the person, providing the service, right? Repair is no different from any other craft. Like, think about going to get your car fixed or something. Like, can you walk in anywhere and find someone who's great at it, who's honest, who knows what they're doing and won't screw up your stuff? Like, that would be so awesome. But it's so hard. It's unfortunately really hard to find someone like that. And I think a lot of it's because of, there's a huge difference in knowledge. And there's a language barrier between like what I know about a horn and what the player knows about a horn.
Yes.
The closer that gap is, the more we can communicate, like the better they'll be able to ascertain like whether I have any idea what I'm talking about or not. But it's again like taking your car to the shop and they're like, oh, looks like it needs an AC, and you're like, I don't know how to tell if that's true or not. It might be, might not be, and then even if it is true, are they going to do it well? So that's something that every saxophonist, I think, has to deal with, and learning at least enough about repair so that you can decide whether you're comfortable with the person doing the job is something that's highly beneficial to being a saxophonist.
And I think that that was actually going to be my next question too, because there's so many oil change places, so many car repair shops all over the place. There aren't that as many, of course, saxophone repairers. Now, yes, there are a lot of music stores. There are a lot of chains, that are super chains that are starting to develop. Music art and arts is starting to buy everything. There's Bertrand's out here, there's Sam Ash, all that kind of thing. But the level, it's not that one person's better than another in regard to, when it comes to overhauls, it's a totally different can of worms compared to, I just need this fixed, I just need this pad replaced, or this spring replaced, or whatever the case may be. So, for a lot of people who are living in more, I'll say, rural areas or not near main cities, and even with the main cities, it's a trust issue as well. That's where it gets to be harder for people, because you don't know if, number one, if you can trust them. And a lot of times too, I've had people say, oh yeah, you just get an overhaul. Just get an overhaul. And it's thrown out loosely, when it probably does not need to happen. You mentioned clean oil adjust. How is that different than an overhaul if someone is wanting to ask about that? And is that something that, your person, the repair person at a Music and Arts or Bertrand's or Sam Ash, is that something that they're more accustomed to doing than an overhaul?
It might be. It really just depends on the person. The words we use to describe these services are pliable, and they're not the same everywhere.
Okay.
It's like going to get your car tuned up. Like, what does that mean? Learning about the specific procedures that are done. I mean, I use the term overhaul, but I have this huge long page on my website that says like what that is from me, right? And it's different from what it is other places. And sometimes, an overhaul from me includes a mechanical reconstruction of the keywork. Sometimes it doesn't. And communicating directly to my clients about what I'm doing to their horn is really important.
Yeah.
So I think actually like knowing enough to go past those sort of like catch-all phrases that are thrown out, is really, really important if you want to have a less nerve-wracking relationship with the repairs you need for your horn. And there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, honestly, if someone wanted to spend a weekend, like just be like, all right, like this weekend I'm staying in, I'm gonna order pizza and I'm gonna read about this stuff. So like next time I go to a repair place, like I know what they're talking about at least a bit. I think that's a really, really worthwhile use of time. And price is not always an indicator of quality. Like even, they might have a great reputation for flutes, doesn't mean they're great at saxes. They might have a great reputation on modern saxes, but you hand them a 10M and it's going to be like really bad. And like in my case, hand me a 10M, like hopefully I'm pretty good at it, but like you give me a Selmer Series 3, like I'm going to complain the whole time, and it's not what I'm best at. Honestly, when people call me with modern Selmers, I'm like, look, like I am not your person. Like this, that's just not where I've spent my time. I've been lucky enough to spend my time doing all the weird stuff. Like if you've got a Con 30M, like I'm probably one of a few people that's done like dozens of overhauls on those. I've literally done more Con 30Ms than I have Super Action 80 Series 2s. And there's way more of those out there. So finding the best person for the job, your particular job, again, requires you to be able to communicate and have a bit of knowledge about what exactly is being done. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer, like that was just like, here's what you do, here's the procedure you follow. But unfortunately, it's a communication issue. It's a talking to people issue. And you need to have like a language you can speak. You need to have a bit of knowledge so that you can have a conversation that you walk away and you've learned something and you know something. Short of that, usually what I tell people is like, call the colleges in your area and ask the professors who they use. If you get the same name 3 times, that's probably a pretty good sign. Call, like if there's not a bunch of colleges in your area, call all the private teachers, call 10 of them, like for real, call 10 of them and see if the same name comes up. And start small. If you've got a new repairer, like don't throw them an overhaul on like the horn you're playing next week at like your biggest gig of the year. Get a neck cork, get a couple pads, like get a dent fixed, like take your backup horn in for some pad work. Nothing wrong with starting small. But yeah, I wish there was like a silver bullet, but I've actually got an article about this problem on my website called The Unprofitable Valley. That talks about like why this is so hard to talk about and like the sort of structure of this problem that I feel like for nerdy people like me might be like a good handle to grab onto to start thinking about this communication issue and how to get the most out of not just saxophone repair, but all the other stuff where we have to talk to specialists because the modern world is so complex and we own so much stuff. There's no way we can actually be expert in everything.
That's a great answer, and I think what I'll do, the unprofitable valley, you said, right? So I'm going
Yeah.
to look for that article. We'll put that link also in the show notes, so this way people can look for it. I love the way you're saying this too. Yeah, it is a communication issue, and I mean, I'm learning a lot already from this as well. Terminology is so different, and the thing is also when a lot of people are buying their instruments, they may be buying it from local stores. They're going to be presented with a different terminology than a pro shop, let's say, that's in another city, or buying it from directly from manufacturer or online. A lot of people are also buying their instruments online as well. You know what, actually, let me take that left turn for a second. A lot of people are buying their instruments online. Some people are of course buying on eBay, right? And they're maybe looking for these vintage horns on eBay. What advice do you have for somebody who's looking to buy a saxophone, particularly a vintage horn, but let's say any saxophone online? What should they be looking for?
So I have a YouTube video called like evaluating a used saxophone for purchase that has a lot of like nitty gritty. But I think, what I tell people when they ask me this question that usually surprises people is like, well, I don't buy on eBay. Like I'm scared, like I know a decent bit about vintage horns, but it is really, really difficult to tell like exactly what I'm seeing and whether I'm actually going to get what I bought. And these days, there's like most of these places have no return policy. And also, one of the things about eBay now is, and I haven't sold on eBay in probably a decade, um, if the horn shows up and the buyer says, oh, there's no neck with the horn, they'll say, send us a picture. So they take a picture of the horn with no neck, and then they force like $1,000 refund, partial refund on the seller. They like force it out of their bank account through PayPal. So there's a lot of motivation for people who have any other avenue to sell their horn to not be on eBay, unless like eBay is the place they built up their reputation. So eBay in particular has become, it was the Wild West, and then it got like a little bit tamed, and now it's like super like messed up neo Wild West now. So if you're going to buy at a distance, reputation of the seller is hugely important. Otherwise, you're just taking a bet. If you want to take a bet, hey, sometimes people win bets, right? Like we all know the story of like, someone you talk to is like, oh man, I, picked up this Mark VI they had labeled as a Bundy like for $200, there's always people that win bets, but they also have like survivorship bias, right? Like they're the ones that want to tell their story. Everyone else who got completely ripped off, like lost thousands of dollars, realized after the fact that they did something really, really dumb. They're not usually telling that story at parties, right? So I think from a perspective of if you're not an expert and you don't have money to burn, buy from somewhere that has a return policy, somewhere that has a good reputation, somewhere that has good communication skills, somewhere that takes lots and lots of clear photos. And as soon as you get it, take it to, if you've got a repairer that you have a great relationship, take it there, or take it to 2 or 3 repairers and get different opinions and sort of triangulate and try to see whether this is something you actually want to keep, and then return it if the answer is no. It's possible to do business at a distance and have it work out well. It's just when it's the crapshoot, when it's the bet, like most of the time, it's not actually a great result. And of course, I might also have bias because usually what I see is someone comes in and they're like, I just bought this for $5,000. And I'm like, you have $2,000 worth of work to have a $3,000 horn. Like this really sucks. And I'm sorry to tell you that, and like that's happened a lot. And especially with, people buying horns for their kids and stuff, it's just really, really, really sad. So I sort of push for a standardized approach. It's maybe a little more boring. And, there's a lot of good dealers out there too that are like, I personally, I live down the street from Get a Sax. And he's a really like honest dude who has a return policy, does his best. There's, there's also Sax Quest. I know Mark, he's a good dude. And there's plenty of other places. These are just the places I know. But, there are dealers out there, and that dealer premium is because they've dealt with the crapshoot already. And, there's horns that they may have bought for more than they're selling it for because now they're advertising it correctly and they're bringing the market back into balance and they're swallowing something, where other times, yeah, they're making a profit. But like, that's because like they make a living giving you a product that you know what you're going to get, that you can return it if you want, that they tell you everything about it that you might not notice, like, and they give you something that is, it's a worthwhile service. So yeah, crapshoot, but if you can reduce those variables, make it a guarantee in any way possible, then I think usually it's okay to do business at a distance that way.
Now, the snag with this though is that for a lot of people, a lot of the offers on eBay tend to be from individuals, who are selling their horns, selling their mouthpieces, that kind of thing. And there usually aren't going to be refunds because it's an individual, it's not a dealer who can absorb that cost. So then what you're saying, person should look for very clear pictures, very clear, accurate description. That's all they could really hope for.
Yeah, and just like if you're going to do that, keep in mind that these individuals, they might not know everything that's wrong with it, right? They might think it is original lacquer, but it's not, and therefore, when you get it, you determine the value is $2,000 less than you paid. They might think it's gold plated, but you get it, but it's lacquer. They might think that it plays fine on old pads, but it needs an overhaul. They might say it's just overhauled, and it may be, but the overhaul sucks. Like, they are not expected to be experts at selling saxophones, right? And they're not. They might be trying their best. They might not be. Like I just saw a horn the other day that like someone who is a professional saxophonist was selling on eBay without saying until the very bottom of the description that it was a soprano in the key of C, not a B flat soprano.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, and it's like, dude, like you know that's wrong. like, like you definitely did that on purpose. There's a lot of that out there. I mean, it's because money's involved, unfortunately. And the larger the amount of money, I think the more careful you have to be. And especially with like Mark Sixes and stuff like that. If you Google like expensive saxophone, Mark Six comes up.
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to perpetrate fraud of any kind within the saxophone world is going to be selling a Mark Six or dealing with those in some way. It's probably a little less likely to happen with like a Bisher True Tone or something like that that is not considered highly valuable. But you have to be especially careful with the really high dollar stuff. The higher the dollar, the more likely it is that something is going to be not quite right or up to your expectations. In my experience dealing with individual sellers.
But the other thing too, like when it comes to Mark Sixes as well, you know, it used to be, and I'm talking maybe 10, 20 years ago, they were more valuable. Let's see, how do I want to word this? I know it depends on each individual horn and stuff like that, but you know, I'm seeing that the value of the Mark Sixes seem to be going down. I don't know if you agree with that. I don't know. Is there like a span? Someone's looking for a Mark Six. Like what? I don't even know if you can answer this, but is there a particular price range that people should be looking for to expect?
It's so highly variable, especially with Mark Sixes. Now, I'm not an expert on Mark Six pricing. I've that market is so wild that like I've never wanted to be a part of it.
Got it. Got
I've
it.
never I think I owned Mark Six once and it was kind of by accident. I work on a ton of them. That was what I cut my teeth on, like in New York City. I mean,
Yeah.
beat up Mark Six after beat up Mark Six after beat up Mark Six, like again and again and again. Like those are the overhauls I did day in, day out for years, on people that needed their horns back, like on Thursday. So I've worked on them a ton and I have a lot of respect for the horns themselves. The design is just so elegant. It's no wonder so many people play them. They're really easy to repair and they hold up really well to bad repair, which is something I think is not really spoken about. It's not really like known, but it's such a valuable thing. If you're a gigging musician and you get off a plane in, St. Petersburg and, your horn's messed up, if it's a Mark Six, you can probably take it somewhere local and you're going to get help and it'll play because Mark Sixes are so durable, so easy to work on, so intuitive. But God help you if you've got like a 30M. Those are persnickety and hard to work on. They're great once they're in great shape, but I wouldn't want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere with one needing to gig that night. So the market for Mark Sixes is just crazy. I do know that the upper end of the market has continued up into the stratosphere. It used to, I think, my like hot take on it is the market used to be narrower.
Yeah.
Late Mark Sixes were still like worth a lot of money, but the early Mark Sixes were worth more, but like not a ton more. Now it's like very particular things like, oh, does it have the double S on the neck? Like there are ones that are north of $20, $25, $30,000. But also like a late Mark Six has been relacquered. Now people know about like serial numbers a bit more. They know about condition a little more. They've got a bit more choice. The marks, they've got an ability to look online versus just, the local store has a Mark Six
Right.
and it's a late Mark Six and it's been beat up, but it's a Mark Six. I'm going to pay Mark Six prices for it. So I think some of the prices have come down, but a lot of the other ones have gone up. And there's been a lot of collecting going on as far as I know. And again, I'm not super into this market, but like Japan and then more recently China is buying up Mark Sixes and they're all doing it at a distance. So they're all like looking for very, very particular things. And the prices for the horns that meet muster with that market have really, really gone up.
That's interesting. I didn't even realize you mean people in China are buying up Mark VIs, not necessarily Chinese factories. You're talking individual people.
Yeah, yeah, and they're like, and Taiwan and Korea as well. Like the market over there has been um, interesting for a long time. I mean, like, go back to the pre-internet days, and there were people that made livings like traveling around the U.S. buying horns and then like flying to Japan and selling them there and making like a ton.
Okay.
Um, and there's, as recently as like 10 years ago, I talked to a guy who was in a music store over in Tokyo, and he was doing his yearly trip to like pick up a bunch of horns. And if you ever went to a music store over there, their prices are way higher than ours. 15 years ago, a Kahn New Wonder Series 2 was selling for like $4,000 equivalent, and that was like a $1,500 horn here. So there was a disparity. But yeah, the Mark VI market is pretty wild. I would say stay away from super beat ones that are selling just because they're Mark VIs, like that they're way overvalued. Stay away from like the super crazy collectible ones because the prices are insane. But look for like a good, solid, original finish Mark VI from a reliable seller, and you're going to get a Mark VI.
That's
They are
great
different,
advice.
throughout the years though, and you got to research that and figure out what you want. But yeah, they're super reliable horns.
And that's great advice. And the thing also is that we have the opportunity, compared to 15, even though the internet was around 15 years ago and stuff, but it's not as extensive as it is right now, so we're very lucky that we have access to all these resources where we can check this out and get more granular in our research as opposed to, like you said, taking a chance when it comes to this. Now I'm going to change direction here for a second because this to me actually is really super important. There are people that live in areas, whether it's in the United States or anywhere in the world, where they don't have access to a good repair person near them. Yes, we have the internet, but that's not always everybody's. That's not their strength, so to speak. So, for example, again, I have a student in Bangladesh. There's nobody there, so I've given him the advice of, calling any colleges, any places that have music programs. Who do they go to? But beyond that, getting parts. Getting parts can be really, really hard. So people that are living, whether it's not close to a good repair person or, they're in a country where it's just, it's all more guitars than woodwinds and brass. What do what kind of advice can you give for them? What kind of things should they be doing to keep the maintenance of their horn going? What kinds of things should they be looking for? What are some repairs that, that they could do on their own? What types of tools, like a leak light or something like that, should they be having in their possession, especially given their circumstances?
Yeah, that's a very tough problem. I'll say right up that I don't have an answer for it. I get calls from folks like that, and one of the things that we don't think about is like you said, parts, like the differential in cost. Like this pad, this is $4 US, right? Like this is. I'm holding it for people who are listening. I'm holding up a drawer that's maybe like 12 inches long by 3 inches wide, has like 120 pads in it, maybe. This is like $300 worth of pads,
Okay.
right? They're really expensive when you start to think about the exchange rate in other countries. The repair parts and supplies networks that most of those places use are China-based versus America or Europe-based, like I use here. So I don't typically know like who they need to talk to. But in the past few years, there has been a surge in the availability of repair parts and supplies that are made in China on eBay. I think they're there because most of the stuff is in English, and it seems like they're trying to sell to American buyers. So they're trying to compete with the stuff that I buy now. But the quality isn't quite there yet, but the prices are way lower. So I would probably say actually for that, like eBay might be a good place to look for like basic tools and pads and stuff. They're not going to be the greatest, but they're going to be much more affordable. And, especially when you're learning to do repair, like you're probably going to screw up a few pads, right? You don't want to get like the best absolute stuff. Um, but yeah, other than using the internet there's a lot more knowledge there than there used to be. There's, but even the book I recommend, it's like $80, right? Which for a lot of people in, other parts of the world it's a non-starter. That can be as much or half as much as they paid for their sax, and it's just a book. So there's still a wide gulf there. It's not as wide as it used to be. It's a problem that I think people are kind of like starting to create solutions for, but I think mostly they're local. I don't think that there's a ton of I know like one or two people that, actually like leave the country, like leave the US and go, like, I think one of them goes to Cuba for like a month every year. There's a guy in Colorado that used to go to various places in Africa every year for like a month or two.
Wow.
And I think that's been enormously helpful to the local musician population, and actually starting to do a little bit on their own and get bootstrapped. But I think unfortunately it's still just a really difficult situation. Depending on where you are, your solution is going to be vastly different. Like, if you're within a day's drive of a city, you can get on a bus. Like, there's probably somewhere that fixes instruments in like a major city in your area of the world. They might not have a whole lot of familiarity with saxophones, but you can give it a try. It's different than here. You can't like just call someone up and start chatting sax, or like send them photos quite as easily. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer other than to say, at least now I think that the difficulty of that problem is becoming more widely known, and therefore there might be better solutions on the horizon. But as for now, it's still catch as catch can.
Yeah, and I wasn't aware that there are some repair people that are going to, other places in the world like Cuba and Africa. What a great idea. Actually, what a great idea for people to continue doing that. And perhaps, I'm just going to put this out there for someone listening who's very enterprising, maybe establishing some kind of grant program or some nonprofit corporation that would be able to pay for the travel and the expenses for, highly qualified repair people to go to places like in South America, like, in some of the other Asian countries, or Africa, and not only to repair people's instruments, but to train people in those countries. That actually would be, I think, a fantastic idea. It doesn't address the parts, conundrum. That's its own thing, but at least that would definitely be a start.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's better than it was, but it's still, there's a lot of people. It might be surprising to a lot of the people listening how many people are playing saxophone in like third world countries and
Yeah.
second world countries. It's huge in a lot of these places, and I wouldn't have known, except I get messages and emails from folks from all over, and they'll send me like a video of their band, and like, I mean, a lot of times the music is just amazing, like they're killing it, and they're like, from my perspective, like they might as well be on Mars. Like, it's a completely different environment. But people are playing, they're loving the saxophone, it's getting popular. And like that's one of the reasons, people say like, oh, what do you think about, the really cheap Chinese instruments? And like, I don't personally work on them, and like, because it's just, they've got a lot of inbuilt flaws. The work I'm known for, I can't do on it, right? So there's no point in paying me to do it. But there's a huge amount of value in spreading the like love of saxophone and other instruments around the world, to have these, like, they might not work great for like a long time, but you can get in the game and decide if you actually like it enough to, step up. And there's people making music that wouldn't be otherwise. And like I said, I think that a lot of those markets are, China orbiting as far as the instruments and materials and stuff. So I think a lot of the solutions for them are going to come from there. But the knowledge of repair is probably going to come from, videos on YouTube and like books that you can find like PDFs of for free. And yeah, it's exciting to see that change even in my career, as I've only been doing this for I guess 20 years and been online like doing it for 15, and seeing the difference in the amount of people that are talking about the saxophone from places other than like Europe and the US is staggering. Honestly, it's really popular in a lot of places. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had interviewed Godwin Louis, and we talked extensively about, how he's made some trips to Africa and how there's an incredible scene in Nigeria and some other regions and stuff. And, as we're talking right now, I'm just thinking to myself, gosh, I wonder what accessibility they have to parts, to instruments, to repair people. It's so different than here for sure.
Yeah.
But so let's say though that someone, does have access to a repair person, maybe it's not like, 5 minutes away, it could be a couple of hours drive, so to speak. But what are some things that people should have as part of, if you play saxophone, like you should have these basic types of tools? What could you recommend for people to have?
I think some people probably shouldn't. um, like saxophones actually used to come with a little screwdriver. Like you probably can't see this.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah. Yeah.
It says Martin saxophone on it.
Huh.
And then I've got one here that says King.
Huh.
And that used to kind of be like par for the course. And still, if you buy, a lot of times, if you buy a Chinese made instrument these days, you'll get like the little white gloves and a screwdriver. Um,
Huh.
and I think that that's like helpful, like in an aspirational way. Like it symbolizes your ability to take control of like the mechanics of the instrument as well, right? It's like if they sold you your car and you got like a wrench and an oil filter, you might not do it, but it gives you more of an idea that you could if you wanted to. I think that so I think some people probably, just knowing enough to communicate and having a good relationship with a repairer that's local, like that's a perfect situation for them. Some people really, really want to get into it and will actually, overhaul their own instruments. James Carter is kind of a famous example of a guy who mostly works on his own horns. He would come into the shop when I worked in New York and talk all the time, but never got repairs. Because he did his own stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And he's obviously a pretty busy dude. He's multi-talented. He plays more than one instrument, but he fixes his own horns most of the time. And he had a hobby, at least when I knew him, of like buying old stuff and fixing it up. And he'd bring it in, and it was playable. Like he did decent work.
Huh.
So there's a huge variety. There's a wide spectrum. I think the best thing is to, what everyone should do is read up a bit, learn a bit, like actually pay attention to it, read some, and then make decisions as to whether you want to get into it, versus like get this set of tools and then figure it out. Like let your level of, let the tools meet your level of interest. And I would probably honestly start off by just like, Googling around, like simple stuff. Like think about if you were going to try and learn to repair cars, right? You wouldn't like pull a like Ferrari out of a barn. You would change the oil on your Camry. The same thing with saxophones. Like don't start with like something esoteric that needs a ton of work. And don't start with something crappy either. Start with something good. I mean, if you want to learn to repair instruments, you need a firm bed, like a firm test bed, and you need to be able to do one or two things at a time. Like change the palm F. If the horn plays before, okay, good. Now change the palm F. Does it still play? You've done one thing. So if it doesn't play, you've screwed that one thing up. If you completely disassemble a saxophone and try and overhaul and put it back together, you've got 100 places where the problem could be. It's really, really difficult to figure it out. So do it stepwise, do it a little bit at a time. When you get good at like doing 5 different things, then maybe do 2 of them at once, and then maybe 3. But as far as a complete tear down and overhaul, like that should be way down the road. You want to reduce the variables so you know what you did. Um, I've actually got an article on my website called like Saxophones on Which to Learn Repair. There's another one that's like, tools level 1. Like if you actually want to start learning repair, like these are here's a basic set that gets you like to where you're changing pads on your horn. But the thing is that selection of tools is like, $300 to $500. So it's not like something that you're going to save money on, initially at least. Probably not for a long time if you're a saxophonist, unless you own many horns. Like James, that's why he would do it, because he had like 100 saxes. So I think the knowledge is much more important than the actual physical work. If you want to do the physical work, then have at it, and there's a lot of resources to do so. Thank goodness.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. The knowledge is more important than having the tools because, yeah, if you don't know what to do with the tools, then you just wasted a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, and like not everybody, is built for it. Like, I'm not a wonderful musician, right? Like when I went to college, like sitting next to Doug was one time when I went to college. There's this guy I knew who like he bought a piano, like a full accordion. He was a trumpet player, and like I saw him on Wednesday when he bought it, and I saw him again on Friday, and he was playing the Lord of the Rings suite from the score on the accordion, and I'm just like, you
Wow.
know, like there's a musician, like that's not me, And I had that experience again when I went to New York, right? Talent combined with hard work is a completely different experience than no talent combined with hard work. And if it's not something someone has talent for, if they don't enjoy it, like you don't need to. As a saxophonist, you don't actually need to do it. But if you want to, like, go for it. You'll learn a lot, and it'll teach you a lot about how your horn works. And for me, the wonderful thing about repair, even though I said I'm not a great musician, like I get to play all these different horns, and it's like suddenly things have become 3D for me about the saxophone sound. It's like I was like looking at a work of art, like a statue, from one perspective. And then when I started playing more horns from different eras and more mouthpieces, it was like I was moving around and I was getting like different angles. And I started to have this like very like detailed conception of what was the horn, what was me, what I could do, like what saxophone can do. And for me, that's been like really powerful and beautiful. Like even though like I'm not a great musician, like you put me in second alto, I can read and probably people won't like know that I suck, but like, that's about where I stop. But my tone, I actually really enjoy my own tone, and I generally have a pretty good tone on lots of different saxophones because playing different saxophones has taught me that. It's showed me what's me. So it's been really, really useful. And I think, knowing how the instrument works, and it just, for me, that really increased my enjoyment. And if you're that kind of person, like, don't be scared, like, give it a try. Like, maybe don't overhaul like your only horn, but, pick up a Bundy or a Yamaha 23, because you probably should have a backup horn anyways, and slowly repad it bit by bit over time. And you're going to find yourself empowered to be a better musician. It's not just about saving money. Like, honestly, it will teach you to be a better musician, in my opinion.
And also, I think this goes in line with, learning how to maintain your horn enough. Let me ask you that. So, like, some basic things, obviously putting grease on, cork grease on the neck, of course, those types of things. It's interesting, I know we should be swabbing out our horns, swabbing out our necks. Some people, even some people, repair people I've spoken to said, oh, no, I don't really advocate people swabbing out the horn. As long as I swab out the neck and, let it air dry, whatever. I mean, there's various interpretations and stuff, but in your opinion, everyday maintenance, what are some good things that people should be doing?
Yeah, so in my opinion, swabbing is good. Keeping your horn in its case versus on a stand, unless you live alone and never have friends over, like, it will get knocked over at some point. I really wish I could keep my horn in a stand because I'd play a lot more, but it will eventually get knocked over. Keep it in the case. Keep it somewhere that's not too hot, not too cold. Like, if you wouldn't be comfortable sitting there, like, your horn isn't either. And the swabbing thing, one thing that actually I find is useful for people who are particularly like gigging musicians or people who play like for hours at a stretch, the moisture inside the horn is not actually spit usually. If you've got decent technique, you're not spitting into the horn, it's condensation. the horn starts off colder than your breath. And so you blow into the horn, and just like, the outside of like a drink can, until it equalizes the temperature with the air, condensation happens, much more in the neck and drips down into the horn. But if you want to swab out your horn after it's warmed up, then not much moisture gets in there after that, particularly if you're playing like, a 3-hour gig or something like that. If you get that moisture in there and then play all night and then swab it at the end, it's better than not doing it. But a lot of that moisture is already like, been sitting on the pads for 3 hours. And depending on your pads, it may have soaked in. It starts dripping down the side of the horn. You get that weird like mark on the back of your bell. So yeah, if you're playing something where you've got a break, just take your neck off, swab the horn out, swab the neck out, put it back together once it's warmed up, and then you're playing a mostly dry horn for the rest of the night. But yeah, just keep it clean. If it ever feels like there's something wrong with it, like if you've got a repairer that you trust, like just get it looked at. If it doesn't feel like there's anything wrong with it, cool. I would say maybe every 2 to 3 years, if you want to like do what's absolutely best for the horn and you've got the ability and you've got a place to take it, that clean oil adjust is a like really, really thorough maintenance regime. But I don't think it's like, you're not a bad person if you don't do it. And you're, probably spending the same amount of money over time, but the clean oil adjust is a, bigger chunk every few years than just like doing what it needs when it needs it.
That's interesting because I've had people tell me, you have to have your horn looked at every year. And in particular, if you buy a new horn, 4 or 5 months later, you should bring it back for adjustments and tweaks and stuff like that. Is that true? If you...
For new horns, I think probably, yeah. I mean, like, so the way they set up new horns, I mean, one thing to remember is like they spend less time building a saxophone than I spend overhauling it, right? The economics of the situation mean that they've like codified these processes to where they are like, in comparison to the time a repairer would spend on it, they are banging these things out. And they do a really good job of getting it like pretty close to being awesome and selling you a product that's like worth buying. But there's a few things that they do because like they know that their pad work isn't going to be perfect. So they spring it really hard. They cork it shut pretty hard when you're getting it. The materials they put on it are usually pretty spongy because like that leaves a little bit of room for slop in the initial setup. They're usually not perfect coming out of the factory. And even if you get one that plays really, really great on day one, probably as you play it and it sort of starts to spring back from its like clamped shut, like being shipped from the factory state, you might find you need a little bit of work. New horns typically cost a little bit like more to work on than you'd think because the way they install pads typically at the factory, like instead of putting a bed of adhesive behind them and like moving it so that the pad is sitting on a bed of adhesive that perfectly seals against the tone hole so it's all lined up in parallel, they use just barely enough adhesive to stick the pad to the key and then bend the key around so that it sits in orientation to like be against the pad cup. And that's called dry fitting. And that's the way they've done it for a long, long time. It's not like crazy or wrong. It's just how they do it. So typically from the factory, it's hard to float the pads where like, the technician like heats it, moves the pad around a little bit and fixes a leak. A lot of times from the factory, that's harder to do than it is on like an old horn that has like a bed of adhesive back there because some repairer has put it in there at some point. So yeah, with new horns, you probably need a checkup or two. With a horn that's been overhauled well, if you don't feel anything wrong with it, then just keep playing. And if you want, bring it back every 2 to 3 years for a clean oil adjust as mostly preventative maintenance to keep it from deteriorating. But yeah, I think if you're lucky enough to have a horn that plays great and keeps playing great, just keep playing it. I just overhauled a horn that a dude had been playing on professionally for 20 years. It was a huge overhaul because it was filthy. It was like an 1/8 of an inch thick green stuff. But he was playing on it and the horn played pretty well. It was honestly like, extremely impressive that this overhaul lasted 20 years, even though it was so filthy. I hope my work holds up as well.
Wow. This is going to lead to another question too, and this is a hot topic. I wasn't even thinking of asking this until you mentioned this. and you mentioned clamping down. So there's people that believe in using clamps all the time, people that don't believe that, people that believe in using clamps, when you're traveling, all that kind of stuff. So what's your take on saxophone clamps?
I think it can work. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer here because the way pads work, it's leather stretched over felt, right? And that felt, depending on the pad you get, can have varying degrees of like malleability, varying degrees of hardness. Um, you can use clamps in a good way. You can use clamps in a bad way. Like you can not use clamps in a good way, and you can not use clamps in a bad way. If you're using them to make up for a bad pad job, like if it doesn't seal without being clamped, and like you take the clamps off, you play it, and for the first half hour it's great, and then after that it starts feeling bad. Those clamps are either making the pad job bad or the pad job was bad to start with. I mean, the felt does compress over time, so depending on the type of felt you have, it might be shortening the length of the lifetime of the pads. Might not if you've got the clamps on there really, really light. If it's like a synthetic felt, there's ways that might not be a problem. If you're traveling and you don't have clamps on and the horn gets jostled a bunch, it might get knocked out of adjustment. And then, then you've got to take it to a repairer. And even if putting clamps on for the duration of that flight shortens the life of the pads by 6 months or I'm just picking an arbitrary number, that's probably better than showing up in the city where you're supposed to play a gig and having a horn that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I'm not doctrinaire about it. The pads I use, I typically tell my clients, like, when you're at home, don't use clamps. If you want to travel with them, that's fine. Just have it be a light pressure because that'll make my pads last as long as they can. When I ship horns back after overhauling, I cork the keys shut because of travel, right? But the way my philosophy on pads is a very light seat. Some people like a really deep seat, like where they press like pretty far down. And if you look at your pad, like on a new Selmer, if you look at the pads, you'll see like a pretty deep seat. Like that impression is pretty deep. And I've seen really great work done with deep seats, right? So I'm not against it. It's just the way I do it is a very light seat. And ideally, I feel like if I'm doing my job right and I orient the pad right, I'm giving the pad the ability to adjust to whatever playing pressure my client uses, be it light or hard, and reach an equilibrium without developing leaks and then stay that way. So I'm a little sensitive about my pads and my pad job having any pressure on there that is stronger than my client's fingers. Is stronger than the finger pressure they use, which is highly variable between people. So long answer, again, we're getting the picture here. That's kind of what I do, right? Yeah. But they are not inherently good or bad. It's just if you're aware of your materials and you're aware of why you're using it and how you're using it, you can make better decisions about what you're doing, whether you use them or not.
Okay, then since you mentioned pads, I want to ask this question. People will ask, what are the best pads to use? Can there be, I know it depends on the horn, I get that, but what?
So I have a video about this called The Best Saxophone Pads. It's a long-winded video, but what I try to do in that video is show people that the best saxophone pads are like quality pads that your repairer is comfortable with. Anything else, if you saw an ad and you're like, oh, these pads look really cool, and you make your repairer use them, you're probably going to get, no matter how good those pads are, you're probably going to get a less good result than if you let them use the ones they are comfortable with, because they're all a little different. They all react differently. It's like if the audience got to choose what reed you were using, right? You might be able to do the show, but you're not going to be as comfortable as what you like. And in recent years, there's been a sort of, end run around the repairer where a lot of pads are getting marketed directly to consumers. So people will request certain things. I had a guy come in, I'm not gonna say his name, famous sax player, and he wanted a certain type of pad. And against my better judgment, because he's a big famous guy, I said, okay, I'll do it. So I used the pads. I didn't like the result. I felt like they were porous. Pad skins can actually let air through. And in my opinion, that is something you can really, really feel. It desaturates the sound, makes it feel like stuffy. Some people say dark. I just feel like it's just not very present. Feels like you've got like a handkerchief draped over the bell. He gets the horn back. He's like, man, this horn's kind of dead. And I was like, yeah, it's the pads you chose. And he's like, nah, man, I don't think so. I was like, tell you what, let me overhaul it with my pads that I like. And if you like it, if you say it's better, then you got to pay for both jobs. If not, you got to pay for none. And I said this in front of his friend, who's a professor sitting there. And the professor goes, oh, okay, all right, yeah. So I kind of pressured him into doing it. So he did it. And I went back 2 weeks later. We sat down in the same room, same professor sitting there. He's playing it. Half second to the first note, the guy goes, oh, man, you got to pay him. So I think that was a case of, he had a preference, or at least he thought he did, but I was not able to provide as good a result as the stuff that I use. And ever since then, he still comes here and he's like, you do your thing. I'm not going to tell you what to do anymore. So get past a certain level of quality and you're going to be good if it's what they're comfortable with.
That's great advice. Listen, Matt, do you have, I know you mentioned that you're going to be shooting a video coming up soon, but are there any other upcoming projects that you have or other video ideas coming up in the future?
So my next big project is I need to redo my website. It's probably 15 years old. I do it myself, so it's WordPress, and it's just gotten so heavy. And a few years ago, this guy known as Sarge at Worldwide Sax, I think Worldwide, maybe it was at Cyber Sax. I kind of forget now. Might have been, yeah, it was Cyber Sax, I think. He had this website. It was one of the early resources on the web that I used when I was coming up. And he had these great articles, and he died, and the website went away after a year. And, the Internet Archive had some of it, but not all of it. It was hard to get to. Not everyone knows about the Internet Archive. So this body of knowledge just disappeared. I actually ended up contacting the family, getting a copy of it, hosting it on my website for a while, but then my version of WordPress got incompatible and made it go away again. So I want to take my website and make it into without getting too nerdy about it, a different type of website, a static site that is really lightweight, really easy to view on anything, doesn't require any third-party code like WordPress, and is downloadable. And I want to keep working on the body of knowledge I'm putting out there, which, other people are doing stuff like this. I think that's awesome. I think the ability of people to read my stuff, read someone else's stuff, read a third person's stuff, and make their own decisions is the way it should be. But I also don't want everything I've created to disappear if I get hit by a bus tomorrow. So I'm trying to make my website into something that is easily copyable so it can live on 20, 30 years from now. Because if I don't get hit by a bus tomorrow, I'm going to keep working on this stuff for another 20, 30 years. I will end up with an enormous body of work. I recently finally put all my stuff in an index, and there's 108 videos or something and 30 articles. Awesome. Getting close to novella length in totality. So the next big project is to take all the stuff I've made, make it kind of open source ethos, and then keep working on stuff.
That's cool. And I know, you're already doing such valuable work as it is. I know people are like, oh, this is going to be so great. so now you put it on here, there's going to be pressure for you to definitely get this done.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, I'm trying to put pressure on myself because it's going to be an enormous job. But yeah, for a very, very tiny sliver of a tiny sliver of a tiny sliver of people, they might be really excited about that.
No, I think this is more than a tiny sliver than you think. Well, listen, let me ask you this. Where can people find you? So what website, your website address?
So my web address is stohrer.com. It's my last name, Stohrer music.com. And you can find all my stuff there. My YouTube, I guess, I actually don't know what the address is off the top of my head. I think it's youtube.com/abadcliche, because that's my oldest internet username. When I was a teenager, I thought that was super cool, because everyone's name was Soccer Dad 95, and I was they're all bad cliches, so I'm gonna have my username be a bad cliche. Super cool, 18-year-old Matt. So that's still my YouTube address because I registered in 2005. But yeah, if you just look up my name, Matt Stohrer, Stohrer, you'll find my stuff. There's not too many Matt Stohrs. So yeah.
Are you on Instagram or anything like that?
No, actually, I'm one of those like prickly people that has forsworn all social media. So
Oh, okay, got it, got it. No, it's not. More and more people are not on Facebook or Instagram. Not, and also maybe not even Twitter as well. So no, that's not a problem at all. But we're going to definitely put these links in the show notes for sure. And listen, I want to thank you for imparting so much knowledge, and this was really, really great. Thank you so much.
absolutely, yeah. Sorry to talk so much. I think you could probably
No,
edit this down to about half the time, but I tend to go on and on and on about saxophone stuff.
no,
It's
no.
a benefit
There's
when I'm making my videos.
Let me tell you something. No, I'm not going to edit out one word because everything you said really, really was incredibly helpful for sure.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Donna. It was really nice to chat with you today.